This is something really special. This is a French officer's coat from the time of the American Revolution. French military uniforms had undergone an incredible transformation since the end of the 7 Years' War. Part of the reformation of the army was redesigning their uniforms, taking new style cues from different countries, and adapting them to French tastes. The French military had new regulations that went into effect in 1762, 1767, 1775, and 1776 before this uniform was made. So for all that change, there was this dizzying variety in catching up with that all. But by the time this uniform was made, there was yet another regulation that had been promulgated in 1779, which really held effect for most of the end of the period of the American War of Independence and moving forward. This was a bit of a compromise in that it preserved what was the slimmer lines of uniforms that were coming into effect in 1770s, which was a result of the influence of Prussian uniforms, but it maintained the long length that was typical of French army uniforms. It also retained, of course, the color of French metropolitan regiments, which was the white of the Bourbon kings of France. Now, by this point in the 18th century, the 1779 regulation had been designed to very carefully allow one to identify the specific regiment that any uniform belonged to. It was probably one of the most pedantic regulations in French military history, and it broke the army down into groups of 6 regiments that shared a facing color. So this uniform's facing color is rose or pink, and that would have been shared by 6 different regiments, but those 6 regiments were further broken down into groups of 3 by the color of their buttons. Now, these are faded by now, but these are silver buttons. So 3 of the regiments with pink-colored facings had silver buttons. They had a vertical pocket flap on the back of the coat, which this garment does, and then they were further identifiable by the number that appeared on the buttons, as well as the application of this facing color either to the cuffs, the lapels, or both. In this case, the combination of the white lapel, the pink cuff, the white metal buttons, silver in this case because it's an officer's coat, and the number 34 clearly identify this as an officer's coat of the Touraine regiment. Now this is significant because the Touraine regiment was one of the French troops that was dispatched to the West Indies during the American Revolution. In fact, they were stationed in Saint-Domingue, which is today the country of Haiti, which won its own independence after only the second successful war of independence in our hemisphere by the beginning of the 19th century, but in the 18th century is a very valuable French colony that the French deployed troops to so the British wouldn't take the war as an opportunity to attack them. From that base in the West Indies, troops from the Touraine regiment, as well as other French troops, were deployed to various campaigns further north, such as the Siege of Havana, and importantly, the final attack on Yorktown, Virginia. The Touraine regiment, possibly with this officer, were dispatched under the command of Saint-Simon. A corps of 3 regiments arrived in Virginia and ultimately linked up with General George Washington and the Comte de Rochambeau's French and American forces that penned the British into Yorktown and forced them to surrender. This uniform is the only surviving uniform of a French regiment from the period of the American Revolution in North America, and the only one that survives, even in Europe, from a unit that was actually at the Siege of Yorktown. Now, unfortunately, we don't know the officer that wore this coat, so I can't say exactly where this was, but because of the distinctions of this particular uniform, we know where this regiment was at the time, and they were here in America as they witnessed the final capitulation of British soldiers that largely ended the fighting here in North America.